everybody. Here we are inside the magic circle. This is Jason Augustus Newcomb, and I'm super excited to talk with the woman that I'm talking with today. I became aware of her through a friend of a friend, and she was giving some advice on working with a demon who had been trapped in a bottle, and I just thought the story was really fascinating. So I'm looking forward to diving in. Her name is Jennifer Nyx, and Jennifer, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So you work as a professional occultist in a couple of different capacities. Obviously, you're teaching a little bit because this person seemed to be your student. Is that correct?
No, she's actually a friend.
Oh, okay.
I do teach, but she was not a student. Most of my teachings is to the general public and just getting information and knowledge out there. When I started, it was really hard to find people to mentor, and when I did find them, they always wanted something way ridiculous, either a super high price or it just wasn't an even interaction. So when I got to the level and point I was at, it's my way of giving back to the community. Whatever information I can freely give, I do.
Okay, so let's dive in on who you are a little bit, because I think probably you're going to be less familiar than some of my guests that I've had on. So you practice chaos magic, you mentioned, but you also mentioned that your biological family has some magical inclinations as well. So let's start with like where were you born, and how did this all come about in your life?
I was born in Illinois, in Chicago.
Okay.
And I was immediately adopted out at birth into a white, very Christian family, to a very Christian neighborhood. So I grew up extremely Christian. It did not work well for me.
Okay.
Just did not mesh at all. As I got older, I found that I was more relaxed and happy in nature and just outside and with the universe. So I started doing some more research. At the time, Google was not a thing. I really wish it was. So the research I got was from librarians, other people I was talking to, and eventually I fell into the Wiccan witch sect, which freaked out my family really bad. Luckily, I had already been disowned by the church by then. Otherwise, I can't even imagine how it would have gone.
What church were you in that you got disowned by?
It was just a smaller Christian church. We did have nuns, so I was introduced to many rulers. We went 3 times a week, and then my grandfather was a deacon.
Oh.
So very, very church related.
So how did you even find Wicca or witchcraft from that environment?
It definitely was not from my family environment. It was at a library. I was just going through the religious sections, and in the very back, covered in dust, kind of stacked and smushed under a whole bunch of other books, was one Wiccan book. Wasn't even owned by the library. I went to go check it out. They're like, that's not our book.
Whoa. So it was just placed there for you.
I kind of felt that way. So I started reading into it, and I was 14 at the time, and everyone told me it was just, I would outgrow it. It was a call for attention.
Sure.
It was something that children do. Just ignore it. It'll go away. It didn't. It just continued to grow and expand. And it's really funny because to this day, my family's still like, she'll outgrow it. I'm 32. It's not.
Probably not going to happen at this point. So you mentioned that the chaos magic became a big part of what you ended up sort of identifying with. How did you find that?
So that one's actually a funny story. I fell into a cult in college. I did not realize they were a cult when I joined them. Quickly came to realization that they were definitely your typical cult. Like when you think about TV cult, that is what I fell into. Wasn't where I was going.
What sort of a cult?
They said that they were an off branch of fairy magic, but one day when I came home, they had burned a pentagram into my living room carpet and were trying to raise a demon. I had no idea about any of this. They had thrown out a few moments here and there where they're like, oh, we want to talk about jinn and discuss some Luciferian things. I was like, okay, I'm super open to everything. I'll listen. I definitely was not expecting to find the group in my living room. We partied quite a bit here and there. I was in college, and I had this really gorgeous glass window that the full moon always came perfectly into. So it was a perfect spot. And I was like, I still wish someone had told me or asked me or something, because I just came home, group of all 7 of them in my living room trying to raise a demon. I was
so, when you say they burned it into your carpet,
it was burned, and I had to rip up the carpet. There was no way to get it out.
They used a lighter and went around and burned a pentagram.
I don't know how they did it. It was just a burn. I'm assuming probably a lighter and or acid of some sort.
Huh? Crazy. That is the first time I've ever heard of someone breaking in to do a ritual in someone's house.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had access to it. I'm super open. I'm a very open person, so they had my key and everything. I'm like, yeah, if you ever need a place to chill, crash, hang out, absolutely. It never occurred to me that I probably should have a list of things that they weren't allowed to do in the house.
Like burning the carpet?
Don't burn pentagrams into my carpet.
But you've ended up becoming fairly intimate with jinn and demons over the years, right? That's something that I saw that.
That is how I was introduced to them. Not gonna lie, the first time it terrified me, almost chased me straight back to Jesus.
Sure.
It was not what I was expecting. I definitely had the thoughts that a lot of people think of when they think of demon and jinn. They're dangerous, they're scary, they're awful, no more so than any other entity that you're working with. It's just a different side. And I slowly got to know them on my terms, and I was like, you know what? They almost feel just like Michael. Archangel Michael was a big part of my life, and I started talking to him.
Saying hello there.
Sorry, my phone was going.
Yeah, it's Archangel Michael giving you a little shout out there.
My life, and when I started talking to Lucifer, I was like, "You guys have a really similar vibration," and I don't know if you've ever felt it, but when a demon rolls their eyes at you, it's heavy. You can feel it. Definitely laugh at you. And he was like, duh, of course we have a similar vibration. We're brothers. And I was like, I don't know why it never occurred to me to think about it that way. And he goes, it doesn't really occur to anybody to think about it that way.
Well, I think some people do think of it that way, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's definitely not the church interpretation of things for the most part. So you mentioned to me when we were going back and forth about this interview that you met your biological family at some point, and that made you realize that they were kind of involved in some magical stuff as well. Tell me about that.
Yes, so I actually met them through 23andMe. Great site.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I was trying to find connections, and I was able to find my brothers, my sisters, and several aunts. Some of them are Christian. I have a handful that are Native American, so I was introduced through to shamanism through them. I have 3 that are in, now this one I might pronounce wrong, Ifa priestess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not fully familiar with that one. I'm just getting my toes wet into that area. But I just recently had an aunt reach out to me, and she was like, I've been told that I need to introduce you to this section of religion. And I totally for it. I've got an uncle who's a Buddhist, so it's very well-rounded. Sure,
sounds like a lot of different influences. It's interesting. It's interesting though, because right now in the magical community, there's a lot of sort of interest in the African traditional religions and the diaspora religions. Ifa and Pambagira and Voodoo and Hoodoo and all these sorts of things. And yet your sort of home is in chaos magic, which is much more sort of like, British pop punk magic. So you're kind of like backing back towards your ancestral roots a little bit more, just like the rest of us are.
Yes. Well, the one thing I love about chaos magic is, for the most part, we don't have any rules.
Sure.
So when I learn something or something connects to me from another religion, I just take it and pull it into mine, which I've had a handful of people that are like, you can't do that. You can't just pick and choose parts of religion that you like and drop the rest. I'm like, I can. I definitely can. I'm doing it.
Well, tell them to take a look at the Greek magical papyri, because it's just full of that. It's every possible ancient religion. They've pulled a little bit of this and a little bit of that into everything they're doing. So I mean, that's
if you look at
magic.
most religions, someone's done it at some point. We're like, oh, I really like that idea. I'm going to transform it, but leave the rest.
So what I like to talk with people about is like what they're actually doing with their magic. So to begin with, let's talk about spirits, because you've already brought up a few different angels and demons and so forth. How do you see them? There's like two basic ways that people look at these things. Some people see them as sort of parts of the collective unconscious, that we're all this great field of consciousness, and they are sort of connection points within it, and they're somewhat within us as much as they are without us. And then other people like to look at it as, no, they're these very discrete beings out in the world that you talk to and you give offerings to. Where do you see yourself on that continuum?
I'm kind of in the middle. I definitely think that they're discreet. They have their own personalities. When I'm talking to someone, 9 times out of 10, I can immediately pick who it is I'm talking to or interacting with. Mm-hmm. For me, the thing that I've learned is there's a lot of confusion. A good example would be Lucifer, Satan, and the devil are 3 different entities, but they're very similar. And the easiest way for me to explain how it is when I talk to them, it's like when you run into a bipolar person, a true, honest bipolar person, mm-hmm. they can switch personalities, and you're still talking to the same person, but they're different parts. And sure. You can see the reflection of both sides depending on where they're at. And they're 2 totally different things, but there's still a connection. And a lot of the entities I feel have that same connection. There's one mass connection, and you can feel the different personalities and types of them, but there's still one singular point of connection.
So, when you're making contact with these beings, what sort of work do you use? Some people use more traditional ceremonial magic. Some people have a more free-form approach. How do you approach spirits?
Mine is definitely free-form because I do work heavily with the jinn, and they were basically my very first teachers. The one thing that they told me was, if I am not comfortable working with a spirit outside of a circle, don't work with them. It's super rude to call something into your home and basically put them into a cage.
Okay.
So when I do workings, I will seal and protect my own personal aura because that's on me. And I will invite spirits to my home, and I will tell them point blank, if you are going to cause problems in my life, you are not welcome here.
And so when you say you seal and protect your aura, what does that mean to you?
For me, it's a lot of visualization. Every person has a sort of energetic bubble around them that is their energy. Mm-hmm. Now, it can be smutted, it can be penetrated, it can even be changed vibrationally. Sometimes when you run into another person, you can even feel your vibrations match, but it's still your own personal energy. When I seal it, I don't want my energy leaking out into another space, and I don't want their energy leaking into mine. So it's sort of like putting on a coat of armor around my own personal energy so that there's no mixing or matching until we both agree, okay, at this point, we're ready to take the next step forward and see if we want to mix energy.
So do you think that's fundamentally different than setting up a magical circle around your space? Because, I mean, it serves kind of a similar purpose, I think.
It doesn't trap an entity into the space. They can come and go as much as they want. They just can't come into my own personal spiritual field.
Sure.
So it's more of a personal connection. I don't want my energy changed without permission. So it's like inviting someone into your house, but saying, this is my bedroom, this is my personal space.
Right.
When we get to that dancing spot, I will open up my bedroom door and we'll check in from there. But until then, this is my bedroom. I ask that you respect it.
I mean, that's kind of the way I've always viewed the magical circle, but I agree with you. Some people do see it as like a technology to kind of force something to happen. But I mean, personally, I just see it as being basically that, laid out on the floor. Just this is my space and your space is over there. When we get to know each other better, you can come into my space. But
exactly.
So what kind of a temple space do you have set up for yourself? Do you work in a physical temple space at all, or is it just in
I do. So my home is very temple in itself. I looked at it as the way of your Greek gods had a temple, your Roman gods had a temple. All of your big gods have a temple, and where their home is, that is their temple. So I keep my home clean. I keep all my spaces well put together so that they're not messy and crazy all over the place. My biggest space is my bedroom. I make sure that that always has a nice energetic feel to it. It's got most of my crystals. I've got another space that's made specifically for working. So again, I'm not mixing too much of my personal energy with my working energy unless I intentionally want to.
So what sort of, you mentioned crystals, what sort of other tools do you utilize in your work? Do you use candles and other things like?
Yes, I'm big on fire. I love fire magic. I do water magic just as much as I do fire magic. I prefer to use the ocean, but sometimes I don't have that to my disposal, so a tub will work just as fine, or a hot tub. Glasses of water if I'm really desperate. I have a lot of plants. Wind, I don't have as much of. I'm not very balanced in my wind, which is something I'm definitely working on. Even in my astrological chart, my wind is a bit lacking. But I try to keep everything as balanced as possible so that there's not one area throwing everything else off.
As long as you brought this subject up, several of my viewers have been interested in people's astrological stuff. So what are your main three: your sun, your moon, and your rising sign?
I am a Sagittarius, Capricorn, Scorpio.
Oh, okay. Wow. A lot of magical energies in there.
If you go through my entire chart, it is all Sagittarius, Capricorn, Scorpio. That is the three. I think I've got one Aries. I've got one Aries in my Mars.
Oh, okay. Well, that might even be your dominant energy, since it's ruled. But anyway,
it's all fire.
Yeah. So when you're reaching out to a spirit, how do you? What's your basic process for that?
So the first thing I do is I sit in meditation and I see if they want to reach out or talk to me first. Sometimes there's a lot of times where they've been trying to reach me and I either haven't been able or in a spot to contact them, or I just wasn't in a position where I've told them, just hold on a bit, I will get to you, I hear you knocking, just give me a moment. Most of the times they will back up and allow me that. Sometimes they bust through the door because they're like, we've got to get this done. I need your attention. Lilith was one of those. I absolutely adore Lilith. And she was like, nah, you're not putting me on pause. We're working with this right now. And I was like, okay, I got that.
Okay, so this brings us to an area that I always like to talk with people about, and it seems like you have a fairly strong sort of visionary nature to you. When you're interacting with the spirits, how do you experience them? Are they a visual presence or an energetic presence?
They normally start off energetic. So when I'm first working with them, it's just an energetic presence. It sounds a lot like that voice in the back of your head. Mm-hmm. It sounds a lot like you. And a lot of people will actually hear energies talking to them and kind of push it aside because they're like, oh, that's just one of those random thoughts that's popped in my head that makes absolutely no sense. Mm-hmm. And if you sit down and focus on it for a minute, you're like, that's not my thought. It's my voice, but it's not my thought. So when they first come through, it's normally in my head. It's a thought that is something that I could have probably thought of, but it's not really my thought. The easiest way to try to explain it to my students is when you have that idea that pops into your head and you're like, that's an amazing idea. I don't know why I've never thought of that before. I have no idea where it came from. Probably wasn't your idea. It's your idea now. It was given to you.
Right.
But it's that feeling that I'm looking for when I'm first having something connect with me. And then after a little bit of chatting back and forth, so it almost feels like I'm talking to myself in my head. Sometimes even out loud I'll be talking. I can start picking out who it is or what area they're coming from, if they're angelic, demon, siren, dragon. They also have a physical presence. When a jinn and a dragon are nearby, the room itself gets hot as heck. You feel the temperature rising. If you take a thermometer in there, I guarantee you it's raised. Your ocean energies are a little bit cooling. It almost feels kind of misty and humid. You might even start sweating. I don't really talk to too many earth or air energies. So I can't really say too much on how those feel. They're very minimal on my contact.
So it sounds like it sounds like you just open up and then just something comes to you. You aren't calling anything specific a lot of the time, or do you often call things specifically to you?
I have my own personal team that I will talk to constantly and call specifically. There's been a handful of times where somebody else has contacted me and said, hey, I really need you to contact so-and-so and such and see how that is. In that case, if I'm calling them specifically, I will have an offering. I don't want to be rude. It's just my way of saying, hey, I would really appreciate your attention. I've got some stuff that I want to work with. What can we do? It's very business-like in manner.
But very sort of casual in approach, like I said.
Yes.
So what kind of offerings do you usually offer?
It depends on who I'm working with. Anubis wanted to be taken to the nail salon. So I was like, done. I can absolutely take us to the nail salon. Some like wines. Let's see. Lucifer actually really enjoyed going to a ballet. So I took him to the local ballet that was in town. And then I gave him an offering of whiskey afterwards. So that was a really good starting point.
And when you say you took Lucifer, did you take an object that Lucifer was in, or did you just sort of say, okay, let's go together, and Lucifer just came as a spirit alongside you?
It was more of a let's go together.
Okay.
There's a lot of spirits that will just kind of jump on and take a ride with me. I have a little spot in my aura that's sort of like a chariot. There's some that just kind of attach and go with me wherever I go, but the newer ones, if it's someone I'm not too familiar with and I want a little bit of space, there's just a little spot in the corner where I'm like, there's your spot, you want to take a ride with me? Great. There are a handful of objects I have that I will bring with me that are either connected to a spirit or allow other ones to kind of taxi ride on.
Okay, cool. So do you, when you visually start to see them at a certain point in the relationship?
Yes. Normally the ones that I'm super close with, my Jinn, Lucifer, Archangel Michael, Lilith, I do visually see them. Sometimes they'll come in animal form. Lilith is big on owls and snakes.
As a vision, or they're a physical owl?
Physical animal. The physical animal will show up. Sometimes I'll have to question whether it's just a random coincidence of an animal showing up, and other times there'll be like a boa out of nowhere that definitely does not belong at like some random place in the city, and I'm like, oh, I see you, I hear your message, I've got the thing that's coming through.
It's funny because I see hawks a lot, and I always interpret that as related to a spiritual matter. I never think it's random. So how do you distinguish between the two for yourself?
If I've seen it more than once, sometimes I'll also sit down and I'll watch whatever it is I'm seeing and see if they do something that's familiar, out of the ordinary. Most times if I see something and it's enough to catch my attention, it was a message or someone coming through. Very seldomly do I look at it and say, oh, that wasn't a message or anything. And even when that happens, like weeks later, I'm like, oh, I missed that. I see it now. Got it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So when you're seeing something in a visionary state, though, is it usually the same sort of an image for the being, or does it shift over time?
For the most part, it's the same image. I'm big on reading auras and energy. So even if it's coming through slightly different, I see the energy first and I'm like, I still see you. I know who you are. And then it forms into who I've known them with. For instance, a couple of days ago, I was working and Papa Legbud decided to pop in. Came in the creepiest, spookiest manner I've ever seen him come in. And I knew it was him immediately. I was like, I know it's you. I know you're trying to do that family scare, like when you have your parents and you're hiding behind a door and you're like, can I make them jump?
Yeah.
And I knew exactly what he was doing. And the moment I called him out, he came back to the normal vision that I've seen him with. It was a little bit disappointed. I was like, I'm sorry. I knew it was you. And he was like, I know, but I had to try.
So when you're seeing a being, does it seem to be the same size as you, or smaller than you, or larger than you?
When I see them for the first time, they're normally their proper size. I think that's just so I can get a general idea of exactly what and who it is I'm talking and dealing with. The more I talk to them, the more they come down to my size, where it's easier when you're talking eye to eye and not talking to a toenail that's 20 times your size. You're like,
sure.
I know what I see, I understand, but I would really like to look at you when we're speaking.
So they're usually, when you first encounter them, they're gigantic?
Yes.
So do they ever get very small, or do they just stay at normal your size?
They'll stay at normal my size. I have 1 or 2 entities that will get smaller just because they like traveling on either a necklace of some sort or something else, so it's easier to work with and talk with them when they're just in a much smaller form.
And so when they're interacting with you verbally, you mentioned that it sounded like it's in the back of your head a lot of the time. As you become more intimately connected with them, does that change? Do they become more of a distinct voice?
Yes. The ones that I have on my personal counsel and the ones that I interact with a lot, the moment they talk, I immediately know it's them.
So you mentioned Papa Legba, as well as the archangels and so forth. So how much is your practice sort of shifting more towards the sort of ATR diaspora stuff, or is it just sort of staying at it's just my thing? How is that working for you?
Definitely a my thing. It's very, it's chaotic in nature, so I just pick and choose what I want, and I flow in between everything. I don't really have... I am organized, disorganized. It's just disarray in everything that I work with, and it works for me, it works for them. It's also like when I'm working with things, I don't care. I will work with Archangel Michael and 6 different demons at the same time while calling in Coyote from the Native American religion, and I'll have them all sitting down at the same table and be like, this is what I need out of you guys. Can you work together to get this done? Most times, yes.
What do your Christian parents think about the fact that you're regularly working with Lucifer? It seems like that's a significant part of your entourage.
Well, they've had me shrink multiple times, and I've been exercised multiple times. Didn't work because there was nothing wrong with me. For the most part, now they just pretend nothing exists and that it never happens, or that I'm just writing a book and it'll get better.
You still interact with him a lot and everything's...
Not as much. My father passed away. He was very open about everything. As long as I was happy, he was happy. Okay. My mother, on the other hand, her and her family come from a very tight-knit, don't embarrass the family, don't do anything that you're not supposed to do, and we'll put you in the closet when we have to make sure that no one else is embarrassed. So for their family gatherings, for the most part, I've got one cousin that I really talk to. Everyone else is just, oh, that's that black sheep that we don't ever talk about until they need something. At that point, they'll call you and be like, I know that you kind of do these sort of things, and I kind of maybe need something that we don't ever talk about. And if I just slide you some stuff under the table, can we pretend that's never happened?
Yeah, I definitely have had a lot of very sort of hardcore born again Christians get tarot readings from me, and I'm always like, right?
And you're like, this still falls into that category, right? And they're like, shh, don't talk about it.
Right. So let's talk about practical magic for a minute, because you kind of brought it up a little bit there. What is your approach to practical magic? What sort of things do you offer to people, and how do you go about doing it?
So for practical magic, the one thing that I offer that has been a huge blessing to a lot of people is just the basics. A lot of people have either learned on their own or learned from Google and the internet, which is great, but they haven't learned the basics of protecting themselves or shadow work, which is super important before you start jumping into anything. So they're on doing multiple things on different levels, and they just need to learn the leveled out basics of where to start, the 101 of things.
Well, give me a quick run through of what your 101 is. What is the protection work and the shadow work that you recommend for people? Without, I mean, I don't want to take away from your business or anything, but
so like I said, sealing aura to me is super important because you don't want anything coming in and attaching to you that you did not invite in. So every morning I seal my aura. When I first started, it took me about 15 minutes. Now it takes me about 5 seconds. It's very quick. It's just, you wake up, you breathe, you seal your aura, you breathe out, you're done, you get going. That's very visualization. I've had a lot of clients that their visualization isn't that great. So one thing I suggest is for my female client or even my male clients is a bottle of perfume. And you will physically write on the bottle, aura sealer. Imagine that it's a magical bottle of aura sealer, and you spray it on you, and it's putting armor directly on you. And that's where it's easiest to start with because your mind is everything. If you get your mind to believe what's happening, that's your biggest arsenal. So we start with that. They have a physical thing that they can look at, that they can feel, and then they can feel it sealing, and then we'll move on steps from there.
How big do you see, for you personally, how big do you see your aura as being? Like where is the edge of the seal for you?
On average, it's about the size of my bedroom. And depending on and that's just a good solid state of it. I can stretch it out if needed. And I can also pull and push energy to stretch it out if I need to suddenly cover my child who is multiple states or a room away. I can also kind of take it off and chuck it. If I feel like she's 3, so sometimes she does 3-year-old things. And you're like, oh Lord, I'm going to put you in this bubble. You don't want to do that too often because that does leave you super thin, but you can use it to seal another person if you feel like they're in immediate danger. Parents in general, I think, tend to do that naturally without even thinking about it. Your child is somewhere in another room, another state, and you just get this feeling. And you push whatever you can towards them, and they later come back and like, you're not going to believe this crazy story of how I almost died, and you're like, try me.
I don't know if all parents feel that way, but I'm sure magical parents feel that way sometimes. But
shadow work, it has a darker side feeling to it, but it's really just getting to know all the parts and pieces of you that you've pushed way down deep that you never want to acknowledge. So you just sit down with yourself and you go inward and you start pulling out that box that we all have buried of things we never want to talk about, we don't want to discuss. It makes us super upset, super sad. And we pull out one card and we start with that one card. And for instance, my card is, I know I can be a bully. I can be pushy. I try to not be. I love everybody, but look at my star chart, it's all fire. And if given the chance, I tend to accidentally run people over. So in my box, I have a little card that says, you can be a bully. And I don't want to look at it. I want to put the card right back in and be like, I'm not a bully, I'm perfect. But that's what the whole point of your shadow box is to pull out all those cards that you don't want to discuss, the things that people have told you over and over again that you are XYZ, and you look at them and you're like, I'm not. Even though way down deep, not that deep, you're like, okay, I might be. I need to look at this and figure out why that triggers me or why I feel the way I do on that. Normally it takes anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months. There's a lot of crying. I've very seldomly met someone who can get actually into their shadow box without breaking down and crying and feeling like absolute trash because you don't want to acknowledge any of this.
Sure. So do you recommend creating an actual physical box and making little cards for it, or are those just imaginary boxes?
I have a physical box. I love writing. I'm big on writing things. It also helps the clients I've worked with to have something physical to look at. And when they're done and they feel that they've gotten through the card, they normally will set it on fire, or they'll put it into another box, and there'll be 2 sides. So on my one bully side, if you flip it over, once I've gotten through that point and I've written out all the things on the front side of how I'm a bully, how I would like to not be a bully, I will transmute that card into works well with others. So then I have it on two sides. I'll have a black side, a white side, and I'll put it into the box. And then shadow work, it's never done. That's the great thing about growth, is the more you grow and have lights, the more shadows you find in other places. And sometimes you'll have to go back into your fixed box and say, okay, I'm back to being a bully slightly. So how did this happen? What was in my other box that's pulling it from this box?
So, I mean, that sounds like that's going to be a lifetime of work to work through all that stuff. And so past that, what then do you work on?
From there, once you jump from your shadow work and your aura sealing, each person normally has something that they're pulled or generated to. So you'll have your healers, you'll have your death workers, people that are just really good at necromancy work. So they're good at talking to people that are sick. They're good at talking to the dead. They're good at mediumship. Now, not everybody is good at this because every person is different, but each person has a chunk that they're really good at. So I will sit down, we'll figure out, what is it that calls to you? Is it healing? Is it death work? Is it, some people are just really good at protection and aggression. We've been told that's probably not a good thing, but I was like, sometimes you just need a tank to protect you. And that's where you go. And you're like, I need what you're good at. But they're like, well, I don't want to be good at that. It's aggressive. And you're like, no, it's just protection. Protection is aggressive. That normally also falls back into the shadow work, where they just mesh really well. And they're like, okay, you know what? I am aggressive, but I'm aggressive in a good way. I will protect those underneath me.
I can be a champion rather than a bully. So your website has some physical products on it as well. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, so my number one physical product that sells really quickly off the shelves, I don't actually have any with me because I need to make more and charge it, is a manifestation honey. The honey comes from organic natural bees. It's not messed with. It's strained. That's it. I make sure that there's no bee parts and bee legs from it. Other than that, it comes straight from the hive. And it's charged with different manifestation blends. So I have one honey that's good for pulling in money. I have one honey that's good for self-love. I have one honey that's good for beauty. And the different ones, they're charged different ways. Normally I'll use different entities. My beauty and self-love is heavily charged by Aphrodite and Oshun. And those work good with teas, breads, just putting on altars. Ganesha loves it. He's got 3 on his altar. I found out it works really well with Saint Expedite. Works well on his altar, because sometimes I just don't have time to make a pound cake. I'm like, I got a lot of honey. It's delicious, and it's been thought out. So it can be used in multiple things. It's also good because it's a visual that you have. You can taste it. You can feel it. And so that's my number one selling product that I have on my site, would be the manifestation honey.
You mentioned something about having some shimmer in it as well.
It does. It has organic editable shimmers. So it looks like shimmery and glittery, but it's safe. I've seen a handful of products that have glitters in them, but genuine glitter is rock, and you should not be eating rock. It just doesn't really do it. Messes up your system. So the shimmer that you see in my honeys, they're completely safe for consumption. You can wear them on your face. They're not going to mess up anything. I personally like them because when you put them into tea, it looks like a small galaxy. And I've actually
it glows in there or sparkles in there?
So if I just don't have my scrying mirror, I'll throw my honey in a tea and I'll use that to scry. I'll use it to talk to different entities. I can do a lot of unusual things with it.
So how much shimmer is in there? If it stands out when you put it into something, a lot? Or?
Actually, not a lot, but for whatever reason, it's very noticeable.
Well, cool. I wish you had some to show me.
I know. I wish too, but I wasn't thinking about it. The problem is it takes about anywhere from, depending on who I'm making it for and what it's for, 2 to 6 months to charge.
Right.
So it's got a lot of pack and power to it.
Yeah, I've got a number of things that I'm running very low on that take a long time to get done. So I'll put a picture of it, on in the probably just on the title screen of our interview, so that people can see what it is that we're talking about. So on your website, I think it also mentions that you're a doula. Is that correct?
I am.
And so that's sort of like a midwife, or?
Yes.
And do you do that just for birthing, or do you do that also for death as well?
Both. I am a death doula, a stillbirth doula, and a birthing doula. I'm very big on the natural hands-off of the medical community. Now, obviously, they have good points and things. If you are dying and need a surgery, absolutely. Go to a doctor. That is what that's for. But if there's nothing wrong and it's just your body doing what your body does, that's where I step in, and I give coaching and advice and help people have the birth that they want to have the natural way. If they want to have a hospital birth, I'm cool with that too. I try to bring in as much natural and calmness as I can with me into the hospital room, because sometimes they get really crazy and chaotic.
Yeah. I have 3 children, and my first one was born in a hospital, and that was it for us. We had the second 2 with a midwife, so we were just
it makes it a lot easier. There's less people in and out. It's calmer. You're not on your back. You get to move the same way you do. My first child, I had 3 midwives and 2 doulas, and it was at a birthing clinic, and I fell in love with them. I had a lot of stress between the internet and people telling me that this is how it was going to go and this is what was going to happen, and you didn't have a choice or say in the matter. And I was like, that's not how I want to have my child. That's not the environment I want to bring them into. If I want to be able to eat, if I say I want to eat a watermelon as I'm in labor, unless it's going to kill me, please just give me the watermelon.
Right.
Do not argue with me. Do not tell me I can have ice chips. I didn't want ice chips. I wanted the watermelon. And I want 6 people in my room with me. I want my whole group. I want to do it my way.
We were actually super lucky to have a midwife for our second child, because she dropped like a foal out of a horse. She came so fast, and so we barely got there, and the baby was in my hand. It was crazy. So and obviously that it can go the other way, and having a midwife is good for that too, because they can hang out with you.
You never know what's going to happen. They're good to have there, and it's just really nice to be able to do things your way. When I talk to a lot of my clients, they're like, I can do that. And I'm like, of course you can do that. Well, can you not do that? If you can't do that, then you can't do that. But if you can do it, absolutely.
So does your birthing work and your magical work dovetail into each other a lot, or are they 2 separate things?
They do. I have a handful of clients that are like, I don't want magic involved at all. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I have a handful that are like, well, I want to get my toes wet, and let's see where it goes, but can you pull back the magic part if I don't want it? I can do that too. And then I have clients that they're like, I don't have a baby. I'm not pregnant. I want to be pregnant. I want to call in everything I can right now. And then I want ceremonies. I want blessings. I want the whole 9 yards all the way through until Johnny is 16 years old. I want the protections. I want the house blessings. I want a party. And I'm like, I can do that.
So, and that sort of work, it seems like you need to be sort of in proximity with the person. Like a lot of magical work you can do at a distance, but that seems like you kind of need to be a little more local. Or do you have a way of doing it not locally?
Yes and no. So there's certain areas where it's harder to do it if you're not local. I do have a handful of apprenticeships or apprentices that are in different areas of different states, and I can kind of connect my energy with them, and they can go through that way and connect the energy. There's also a lot of different rituals and things I've found so trees have a communicative root connecting system. This is science. It's been proven. They talk to everyone. So if you can find one tree, it will connect to some other tree. It might take them a while to get that connection, but it will connect. So I do a lot of tree magic if I can't physically get there. Water is the same way. If I can get them to a body of water and me to a body of water, so long as it has a connection point at some point, I can use that almost like an Ethernet cord and connect the energies that way. There's also clients that they're like, I just want different Reiki connected until a month up to my birth, and then can you come to my state? Last year, I flew all the way to Oregon, and I had a client that I had been talking to for a year, and we had been working through everything, and she called me up, and she goes, I've got about 2 weeks, somewhere within this 2-week time frame, this baby is coming. I'm like, all right, I'm there. So we did a lot of hands-off and hands-on.
So if you could give some advice to a young person who's just getting into the magical life for themselves, what would that be?
Stop second guessing yourself. There's going to be so many people that step in and tell you you can't do it that way. Who says? What makes them so special that you can't do it? There's so many different ways you can do things that might not be right. The whole internet can probably disagree with you, but if it works for you, it works.